This is 20 minutes of impact from the United States Energy Association Power Sector Podcast. I'm Herman K. Trabish. I've covered the power sector since 2006, and I currently report for Utility Dive. My guest today is Hawaii State Senator Chris Lee, co-founder of the Electric Innovation Initiative. Senator Lee is going to describe his recent meeting with local and state elected officials to drive momentum for scaling energy sector electrification technologies that can protect reliability and affordability and protect against fossil fuel volatility and shortages. Senator Lee was elected to the Hawaii State Senate in 2020 after serving as a state representative from 2008. In addition to his senatorial duties, Senator Lee is president of the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators and co-founded with California Energy Commission Chair David Hochschild the Electric Innovation Initiative in January 2025. So, Senator Lee, why was there a need for this June 11 meeting that you called here in California with a national spectrum of state and local elected officials to discuss the scaling of electrification throughout the economy? What was your purpose in this meeting?
It's such a great intro because I think it also paints the picture of why we need to engage elected leaders to begin with across the board, not just on electrification and energy and all this, but right now, obviously, we're in a time with a backdrop of immense political division and immense conflict, and I think a lot of disconnect, frankly, from the average person to their folks who are actually making decisions on their behalf. And we see that in DC, we see that on the news every night, we see that in social media. But stepping back from that a minute, it's very different, I think, when you talk about state and local engagement and outcomes. And where we're seeing right now, I think across the country, immense desire to continue working together, to work not only with each other across party lines, but across state lines from place to place, is in this area where we are at the local level, where you get up in the morning and you walk out the door, and what kind of roads you drive on, what kind of schools your kids go to, what kind of healthcare you have, all those things, like 90% of the stuff that affects us day to day is decided at the state and local level by folks who live down the street from you that you can call up or go down and have an actual conversation with. And in that context, politics as we know it, as we think about, Congress and the president and all that stuff is really different animal. And here it's a
Absolutely.
place where folks, you really got to solve the problems, the nuts and bolts problems for things that your neighbors and your colleagues and family expect you to fix in your local communities. And so there's this desire to work together. And one of the things that I've really discovered recently, after being elected and having good fortune to serve in that role, is it's average people who are filling these roles, and they're not experts in every last thing, even though the public expects us to be. And so when it comes to energy and electrification, and you're dealing with immense, complex regulatory frameworks and financing models and all this stuff, and it's really something that takes time to understand. And so for a lot of our elected officials, where you have almost half of the state elected officials, there's 7,500 state legislators roughly across the country. Roughly half are newly elected in the last two election cycles, which means those folks are learning the ropes right now of what it means. And so trying to get back to your question, I've been a really great politician. I can go on and on, so stop me. But to get back to your question, you know, we need to be able to connect, I think, our leaders right now in the places that are going to be making changes and decisions that are actually going to change things in real terms and not just continue the partisan debate in DC. We need to connect them with the real world issues of affordability and cost and resiliency and all those things, and the actual solutions that are out there. Like, what does the new innovation and technological change that we're seeing so rapidly happen look like? And what does it mean to be able to take advantage of that? And what can we do as policymakers to help create a clear path and de-risk the investment needed, and do all the things to really help scale solutions that are going to be answers to, I think, a lot of the challenges that we hear about from regular people every single day.
It's interesting. It- I think if people are just used to looking at the headlines, their news feeds on their computers or their phones, and watching the news, the cable news, they may be surprised to find out how effective state and local elected officials are day in and day out. It may not be the optimum solutions, right? But they have to reach solutions, and they do. And I think that's one of the reasons that we call the states the laboratories of innovation, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think, and what's really exciting about this is you can try different things, right? There's 50 different states and plus territories, and there's different leaders in each one, and each state's got a different set of needs, although many, overlap. Everybody's worried about affordability. Everybody needs the lights to come on when they flip the switch, and everybody needs to respond to new disasters and insurance costs and all these things. But we can experiment in different ways and try different things. But what's powerful about this laboratory of democracy and innovation and change is when something works somewhere, right? Rather than start from zero and recreate the wheel in all the other states, right? You can talk with those folks and figure out, right, what did you do? What did you learn? What were the landmines you stepped on to avoid? And how do we really adopt whatever makes sense for our state, using that as a launch pad? And that's really, I think, where getting together our policymakers from across the spectrum politically, from coasts, from the Midwest, from urban and rural, and all these things to talk about these things and then see firsthand on the industry side where the innovation, where the tech, where the solutions are going is so
That's,
important because it really helps
that's
inform that conversation.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about next. You went one step further than just calling a meeting. You gathered people here in California, and you took them on tours. And I got to tell you, that is a really brilliant strategy because I've walked the floors of so many energy conferences of so many different kinds of energies. I've looked at natural gas turbines. I've looked at the bolts that hold wind turbines together. I've looked at the way people put panels on roofs. And there's nothing that brings it to life more than seeing how it's done. Now, you took people to several different places here in California. Tell us a little bit about your reactions and maybe something about the reactions of some of the other officials that were with you about what you saw. I wanted, first of all, you took a tour of Rivian, which is really an emerging, important EV, electric vehicle fleet and charger deployer. And you also took them to Harbinger Motors, which is a smaller operation. Uh, they specialize in medium duty electric vehicles, making them. Well, tell us a little bit about what it was like to be in those places and what you saw and what maybe some of the others saw.
Yeah, it was a fantastic opportunity. We were actually at Rivian, I think it was the day or two after the launch of the R2 nationally, and so we got to go talk with their folks. We got to see the vehicles. We got to um, talk about what the future pathway looks like, not just for Rivian, but for the EV industry in general, and what it means for some of the conversations going on right now about transportation and cost and all those things. And we had a diverse group of elected officials, not just from any one place. It was from all across the country. We had Democrats from a number of states. We had Republicans from a number of states, and we also had folks who are from local governments, like mayors and others who joined us along the way. And getting this group together is really fantastic because you can have like a real conversation with colleagues who are in the trenches, and politically with you. They understand the complex nuances, and you're able to then meet with folks who are at Rivian, in this example, who are leaders in the industry, doing new things that others have not done before, and expose people to really, what is it that makes possible what they're doing? How are they able to scale and deploy these things that are really quite popular and taking off? And what can we do collectively to help bring these home to our home states? And everybody's reaction was pretty phenomenal because the new R2 is right. It's a much more affordable EV truck and SUV. platform that really, I think, hits on a lot of the desires for the market in states all around the country. And you're seeing that interest. But for a lot of the policymakers, folks some had never been in an EV before, had never driven one. Certainly had not talked with leaders in the industry on the manufacturer side, or, for example, with utilities that are doing some of the back end deployment of capacity to be able to fuel a lot of these new vehicles. And so seeing people really come to kind of realization that, wow, this is like real. This isn't like some, PowerPoint that I'm seeing about something that's going to happen hypothetically if all the stars align 5 years from now. This is like, on the street literally right now. And that's fascinating because it really just lets people engage in a way that they can really dive into the real solutions and figure out, okay, if you're gonna come to our state and be able to sell vehicles and create jobs or manufacture them and build a new plant, which is being done, in Georgia and other places, that's going to benefit my local community. What needs to happen? How do we create that safe, de-risked financing pathway for you? How do we create the educated workforce? How do we do all the things that ultimately help build companies that are truly American drivers of the economy, that can produce products that can affordably reduce the cost of transportation? And what's really exciting about this, and I'll shut up in just a second, is that models like these that come in, right, are not targeted for the ultra wealthy or anything. I mean, this is like truly kind of middle of the road cost, like average cost vehicle that can be accessible to people that have never been able to take advantage before. And obviously with EVs, you get the lower cost of fuel, which is like almost night and day difference, especially now in with Iran and the cost of fossil fuels and everything. But also, I mean, you have way less maintenance and those costs. And so seeing leaders really start to understand what that means in real terms for the average family and what it can mean is just so empowering because it opens eyes, I think, in ways that policymakers and lawmakers simply have not tangibly connected with before. And that can make all the difference when you're having a conversation, months later about a policy on something or, where we invest or what have you. So I think it's tremendously powerful.
You also took them to Harbinger Motors, which is a little bit different. They make medium duty uh, vehicles for fleets, for companies that need medium duty transport. And I would imagine that when people see that there's a company that's specializing in that type of vehicle, and that you could bring that to your state or your city and get all of those vehicles running around your streets spewing emissions from gasoline-based vehicles, it must be sort of like you said, an eye-opener that people realize that here's a company that can meet that fleet need with clean fuels and get people off of, like you said, dependency on Middle Eastern gasoline, right?
Oh, absolutely. It was really exciting. We actually got to drive some of those,
Uh,
box vans and things like that. And I say this as someone who in one of my previous lives, I drove a box van doing uh, kind of donation routes that I go pick up people's donations for a company. And it is just a total difference in quality of experience because you don't have the vibration and the loud noise and the fumes and all that stuff. And everybody got a turn doing it. And to think that now there's this opportunity to do all that in cities all around the country is really exciting. And I'll say, the we as much as we talk about you got cost savings and emissions and all these great things, it's sometimes the unexpected things that you'll never get in a webinar or a slide deck, that you realize when you go and you're able to do this stuff in person and see in person and talk to the people. And a couple things that were big takeaways were one, that driver experience that people are just less tired as workers who are driving these vehicles at the end of the day because they don't have to go through all of that and put up with it in the same way. And it's just a much better experience and cleaner and mentally. puts them in a better place. But the other thing is for your average family living on a busy street to not have, daily trucks coming through that are loud and noisy and that sort of thing in your neighborhood is tremendous. And so from a political perspective, people realizing that, wow, this can actually help solve a lot of the noise complaints we're getting or those sorts of things is really a game changer.
You also took these folks to the Port of Long Beach. Now I know the city of Long Beach and the investor-owned utility that serves it, Southern California Edison, have done a ton of work, and I've talked to them often about how proud they are about electrifying the Port of Long Beach. And if anybody's ever driven near a port and seen all these 18-wheelers sitting in line polluting the air while they're trying to load or unload, you got to really get excited about electrifying a port. Now, you're no stranger to ports. Hawaii has a few seaports. What impressed you, or maybe what impressed some of the other officials in Long Beach?
Yeah, Long Beach Container Terminal is, it's one of the gold standards, got to be in the United States, for how to do things efficiently, safely, and to do it in a way that is, obviously, electrified and going to save, kind of on all the different buckets as you go forward. And, I've been to a lot of ports. Hawaii, we rely on them for our literally for our lives. But they're often noisy. You've got a lot of competing. It's kind of like an organized chaos, a dance of all these different vehicles moving around, everything, and all that. But what Long Beach Container Terminal has been able to do is to electrify and automate much of that, and to do it in a way that isn't displacing jobs and creating all these other problems, but rather actually improving the quality of working environment for the folks who are employed there and guaranteeing them actually a safer work environment with continued job guarantees, into the future, which is really exciting because that is a model that can be replicated. And when you're walking around, you realize you're watching these containers come off ships by cranes that put them onto these electrified, automated vehicles that move them around, and the whole process looks like it's happening, by itself. It's like the containers are doing this magic dance onto these trucks, and they're able to deliver much more efficiently a container from a boat onto a truck to, wherever it's going, onto out to a store or somewhere else, uh, much faster than other competing terminals with traditional tech. And that's something that means cost savings for everybody who's going through there. And even at times when, and we had learned during the pandemic, when there was dozens and dozens of ships bottlenecked and waiting to deploy because of all the headaches that were caused in the supply chain. Long Beach Container Terminal not only kept on its schedule and kept moving stuff through because it was so efficient, but it was able to take additional capacity from other terminals that couldn't handle it. And so these kinds of things are made possible by the electrification of the technology that really is super impressive. And that's the kind of thing that I think can really help reduce costs for that commodity exchange in ports around the country in the years to come.
Uh, Another thing about it is that all of those vehicles, all of those heavy duty operative equipment types now being fueled by electricity, and especially in a state like California that gets so much of its electricity from clean energy, the amount of savings just in these recent events that we've seen. Right now we're recording when oil is near $80 a barrel instead of the price that it was earlier this year at around 60. It went up at sometimes in the last few months to over 100. Imagine the amount of money that was saved at that one port because it wasn't burning gasoline made from oil. It just amazes me, but we're running short of time. Senator Lee, I want to ask you one more question. You've told us a little bit about the takeaways that you had. If there's anything else on your mind that you want to share, I'd love to hear it. But the main thing I want to hear is, having seen all this, what kind of state, local, federal policy supports do you think are going to be needed to drive this kind of electrification around the country?
I think there's something different in this moment that we're in, kind of collectively, than before. As we think about where we go from here in different states, what kind of policies, right? What kind of all that stuff, and that's this, right? We're all facing massive affordability issues. We're seeing all these different things come to a head with international global politics and supply chains and fuel costs and all that. But that is a nonpartisan issue, right? We have to face this collectively. It's not something we're divided over. We all want to address this, which for the first time I think is driving um, people to work together in ways we haven't before. And it's clear that technologies like these that can really reduce these costs and drive innovation are going to be something that can benefit red states, blue states, and everybody in between. And that's why it's so exciting to see Democrats and Republicans work together on this stuff. And at the end of the day, I think what really changes things going forward is that we recognize looking backward that, the United States was able to dominate the 20th century global economy because we embraced innovation and because we doubled down on that and said, we are not just going to do what we're doing. We're going to invest, we're going to be bold, we're going to take risks, and we're going to do all the things we need to do. And that led us to this place we're at now. And yet we're seeing countries around the rest of the world start to eclipse us now with technologies that we invented here in the United States, like photovoltaic cells and other things like that. And they're going gangbusters elsewhere, and we have to not only catch up, but we have to make sure we're positioned so that we are not going to be left holding the bag with more expensive fuel and riskier supply chains and all those things that expose us to global threat. And so, it is that innovation that really drove our American economy. I think going into the 21st century, if we work together collectively, and I think this is an issue that Republicans and Democrats absolutely can agree on, we can position our industry and our industry leaders in transportation and electricity and appliances to work together to advance some of the tools that will make us and position us to dominate the 21st century. And I think electrification is one of those absolute drivers that is the low-hanging fruit in our economy that we can just push forward on and reap massive benefits from with new jobs and new investment, lower costs of power, and ultimately the security we need to have a secure and robust economy for the 21st century. And that's something I think that's going to really start to shift the narrative and the politics and really get people to work together.
Okay, that's a great place to leave it. And we have, in terms of specific policies, we've seen policies that really were effective, and hopefully we'll see them again. But for the time being, that's where all we're going to talk about. I want to thank my guest, Hawaii State Senator Chris Lee. He's described the Electric Innovation Initiative that he's working on and his recent work to create momentum for scaling energy sector electrification technologies. I also want to thank my producer, Melissa Brown. And as always, I want to thank our listeners for taking the time to check out the USEA Power Sector Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, like, follow, and share with everybody you know. Our quest for energy transition solutions.